Okay, so for this video, I was gonna talk about Pillars of Eternity, uh, and then at some point throughout this, I want to put like a Christian perspective into it. Um, so there really isn't any kind of any videos out there, as far as I know. I mean, I'm sure if I dug deeply, there's no like real Christian perspective on this game. So, um, I found this guy. I've heard of this guy before. I believe he's the founder of Obsidian, and I think he's also one of the founders of Fallout. So I think he's called Timothy Kane. Um, so he might talk about here a little bit about the creation of the game. Let's just oh yeah, also fair use is a thing.
Today I want to talk about developing Pillars of Eternity. This has been a very well-requested video, but one I put off on doing because, like South Park, I was not involved in Pillars in any lead role, and my notes on it are brief. I don't have a lot of deep notes on Pillars. Luckily, this wasn't that long ago, so I can remember a lot of stuff, but it's not like Fallout or any of the Troika games, or especially WobStar, Carbine, where I have extensive notes on the development. But I think I can answer a lot of questions and tell you some fun stories about it. So let's go. So I was on South Park since October of 2011 when I joined with Obsidian. Before the Kickstarter for Pillars the next year, in September of 2012, I was asked to be involved. Josh and Fergus came to talk to me. We talked about some designs I could do. Did some videos before the Kickstarter even went live, because there are stretch goals and updates that have to be done. The Kickstarter, though, turned out to be huge. If you remember, we asked for $1 million, and we made that on day one. And since the Kickstarter ran for a month, by the end of the month, we had 4 million, I think a little more than 4 million. There was a lot. So I got involved in design stuff. And while I was still working on South Park doing programming,
Okay, I don't know, a bunch of this is just like crunching the numbers and stuff. Let's go take a look at something. I mean, it's kind of boring, Let's just find something a little bit more interesting. Okay, so I found some kind of a Reddit post here. All right, let's see what happens. I'm not really sure what this says. It says Pillars of Eternity 1 and religion/personal spirituality. So it says, I'm also a Christian by most definitions and have been religious my whole life. I'm curious if any of you guys are yourself religious, and what do you think about the lore details of the, I guess, like, quote unquote gods being artificial? All right, let's read some of this here. For instance, the big line, the gods aren't real, is a little misleading. The gods are absolutely real. They are just constructs those divinity is ascribed. Where was I reading at here? On its own, this is kind of a beautiful and sad portrayal of how our lives are shaped by the things we worship in the real world. This may be a god, or it may be something else. The fact that Theos invented these gods and twisted them into a standard for all societies only reinforces the game's other themes of authority and truth. The game makes no real comment on the legitimacy of faith, but rather asks the question, what is the content of your beliefs and actions? Because regardless of what exists outside of our perception, I'm losing my train of thought here. Where was I at? What is the content of your beliefs and actions? Because regardless of what exists outside our perception, the things we believe and do create gods. In a way, the gods we are given are products of filtered perception and ancient power structures beyond our control, but in a way very real. In the case of real-world Christianity, Jesus was a real guy and all, but what he's inspired the world over is everything from war, hatred, and prejudice to charity, kindness, and tolerance. All of it due to perceived godhood made real by the thousands of years of human action to follow. Truth is what we crave, but faith is what has power, for better or for worse. Okay, so that's an interesting little statement there. So yeah, I mean, this is obviously like an artificial world and everything. It's not a real world. I like to look at a lot of these kind of games. It's almost in a ways like kind of like a science thought sort of experiment. Oh yeah. Also, I'll stay here before I get too far into this. I don't know how long this video will be. I mean, probably my standard for making a lot of this kind of like of these types, it might be like 40 minutes. So I'll try to shoot for there, but we'll see what happens. Might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. Oh yeah, I'll also say that Pillars of Eternity, in a lot of ways, I have to think of exactly why it is. I think it's kind of like it's like my favorite out of all the different we call it the Dungeons and Dragons like games. So it's definitely one that I like a lot. Although I have to try and remember exactly why that entirely is. Granted, I haven't played a lot of these games in a long time, though, either. Okay. Okay, so I was saying about how a lot of ways I like to view a lot of these Dungeons and Dragons or kind of like, CRPG games, or, I mean, frankly, they can be more realistic, too. I mean, realistic games and fantasy games, they're all more or less fiction. One has magic, one, well, In Holiness talks about Christianity, but they're all kind of like, fictional little, well, I kind of view them as like science projects or science, it's like it's a world where you can kind of exist in and do things in outside of reality, but it's not real, but it's kind of real in some sense too. It's real to the individual. So it's like, it's kind of like putting a little box and you can just kind of mess around with it. In a non-blasphemous way, right? Like, I mean, people, again, like In Holiness, only God is God. I'm just a sinner. I'm just a stupid sinner mortal. But kind of like the way Dungeons and Dragons in some levels, especially a single-player game, again, in like a non-blasphemous way, you're kind of like a quote-unquote God in your own little world, kind of. I think this is the draw and the appeal that a lot of people have to playing these kind of games, especially like a single-player video game, is that you're kind of like you are kind of like a deity, and like if your single-player character, he's almost like a god in his own way, or she or whoever you make. And like it's like playing The Sims, right? You look at it from a top-down perspective on life, in your own little world that you get to kind of you get to play God as, right? That's kind of like the point, a lot of ways, of Dungeons and Dragons. It's also very you gotta be very careful, right? Because in worship, you only worship God. God is the one and only God. We are not God. We are not gods. We're never going to become deities. We're just mortals. One day we're gonna die, and we're gonna go to stand before God on Judgment Day, and we're either gonna go to heaven or we're gonna go to hell. But we're not gonna become like angelic beings. We're not gonna be like angels or demons. We're not gonna be like deities. We're just souls that will I believe one day Judgment Day will come, and then we'll either be rewarded or punished. Now maybe certain people will get to sit on like a throne, or we'll get like a something nice, right? But we're never gonna like become more than that. We just live and we just die. So the idea that like we are going to become gods, it's just not true. And these like so-called gods in these worlds, they're not real either. They're just artificial created beings. And I know this is definitely a big problem in like gaming, because it makes you feel powerful, like you have power over another person, or power over this perceived person in this world. But they're not. But like they're not real. Or you're not actually a deity. You're just a mortal. Only worship and glorify God. Okay. Also, like there's a whole magic, right? Magic makes you feel like a deity in your own way too. Like I can just summon some kind of elemental power for myself, customize it however I want, and I can use this like almost this like again like divine power over like creation. I can like do whatever I want. I think like I saw him like you play the Magic the Gathering, the trading card game, and like I had one of those little promo cards. It's like it's like here I rule. It's like it's like this is for me. This is more my own interest or my own desire or something. Like magic is all about it's that I get to do my will over the universe. It's not that I'm going to trust in God. I'm going to trust in myself. I'm going to do what I want when I want to do it. And I'm not going to submit to the will of the Holy One of God. I'm going to submit to my own will. Or I'm going to enslave other people and force them to submit to my will. Again, that's also another aspect of what magic is. The Lord Jesus Christ, when he walked this earth, he's known as the Son. He submits to the will of the Father. And magic is all about trying to release these bonds that you're supposed to follow, so that you get to. It's all about you. You, the individual, are gonna force your will upon the universe, and you're gonna bend the universe to your own submission, or whatever you want to do with it. And some people try to justify and rationalize their bad behavior by trying to claim they're like a good person now, right? Because it's a lot easier. Well, I mean, it's a lot easier to say, well, I'm a good person. So, it's like, I'm stealing all this money, right? But I'm a good person. Or I give some of this money away. Or I'm it's like everybody has their own justifications and their rationalizations and how they're going to try to come to terms and peace with their choices. But, there's a lot of evil. It makes you feel good, right? You don't have to feel bad, or you get to feel good. Because, because how would you live with the guilt? Knowing you were doing something that's basically terrible to another person for really no real reason. So you come up with these stories in your mind. You're like, I'm a good person, or it's really like, it's the ends justify my means. You sit there and you explain why you're so virtuous, and you're not really a bad person. But the reality is that you are a bad person, and you are doing terrible things. But you don't want to have to live with the consequences. It's kind of like what magic is. You know, in no ways magic is evil. You know, and God in heaven, he condemns and forbids it. And no matter how you want to justify this, you know, God condemns sorcery. So we shouldn't use it because God says so. All right, let's see here. How long is this so far? 15 minutes. I might read one of these comments here or something. I mean, obviously there's a lot of secular people, but I mean, who is really to say sometimes either? Talk about this being, I guess, quote unquote, called Eothas. I guess this being called Eothas is supposed to be kind of like I think it's like, you know, he's supposed to be like more of like a kind of like the good deity or whatever. He's more kind of supposed to represent Christianity. Although, let me look at the name up here. I think, again, I haven't really played this game in a long time. They called him Theos, I believe his name was, or whatever it says on here. So, I mean, I know I talked about this in a different video. I think that's supposed to be what his name is. So, I mean, obviously there's spoilers here. I mean, I'm sure it already has some spoilers. So he's supposed to kind of like be like the, I guess, quote unquote, the version of kind of like of who God is in this world. And he created these other like so-called gods or whatever. It gets really gray and it gets really shady. I mean, it's also not real. I don't know. It talks a lot about there's kind of just a lot of nonsense here. All right, I'm gonna go watch maybe like another video here. Sure. Let's take a look at one of these trailers here.
Mature.
Gods tend to keep their distance, even among the faithful. That suits us fine. Last time a god headed our way, he killed thousands. After we stopped him, a whole generation went wrong. This is our punishment. It's no way to teach a lesson. If it's something else, maybe we can stop it too.
Sure. Okay, so here's the video that says simplified story of Pillars of Eternity. I might stop it a couple times. Let's no, obviously it's probably gonna have some levels of spoilers to it, but it's okay. Let's just hear what this person has to say.
Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire continues the story from the first game, and in case...
Oh, so this one's talking about Pillars of Eternity 2. All right, well this can be kind of both of them in one game then, or one video. So basically it's a direct continuation from one story to the other. I think it shows like Japanese subtitles. Let's see what happens.
You didn't play the original, or perhaps you're just looking for a quick refresher on what happened, we wanted to provide you with the complete, simplified story so far. The tale begins with your player character travelling through an area known as the Deerwood. The caravan you're a part of is headed to a nearby town, but on the way there, your path is blocked by a fallen tree and you set up camp for the night. However, that evening, a mysterious storm known as a Beowick descends upon your camp, and you're forced to take shelter in some nearby ruins. As you go inside, the entrance collapses behind you, and you must venture through the tunnels to find an exit. But that isn't all you discover. Upon making your way outside, you spot a group of cultists performing a strange ritual at the foot of a huge machine. As you stare down at them, a blast of concussive light suddenly erupts from the device, knocking you unconscious. While asleep, you have a vision. You're in another place and another time. You see a machine which is similar to the one you just saw, but immense in size. At its base is the same man who you saw performing the ritual. You move closer to him. A question grips your mind, but before you can ask it, you wake up.
Okay, so I think that picture right there, that's supposed to be like a guy. I think his name's Theos. So he's kind of like quote unquote like the whole. He's supposed to be like, you know, the people who made this game, their depiction of who they think God is, or who he could be in this world, or how they're gonna paint him. Okay, let's keep going.
As you return to consciousness, strange visions begin to flash across your eyes. People seemingly being tortured or burnt at the stake flicker in and out of existence. Seeking help, you continue on to the nearby town. It doesn't take long for you to learn that the energies you are exposed to turns you into what is known as a Watcher, a person who is able to see souls. In the world of Pillars of Eternity, souls are not just a metaphysical concept, but rather a quantifiable and measurable essence that can be transferred, stored, or moulded. When a person dies, their soul leaves their body, and under normal circumstances, it will eventually be reincarnated into the body of a newly born child. However, the memories of these past lives become imprinted on the souls, and as a Watcher, you can see these memories and interact with people's souls, learning their story. You're told that a nearby keep is home to another Watcher, and that he might be able to help you. However, upon arriving there, you find the place derelict and filled with spirits. As you fight your way inside and deeper into the keep, you eventually find the old Watcher, but he's not quite what you expected.
He has sent for no callers. Be gone, deceiving spirit.
Mayorwald will speak with you, but you will maintain your distance, or you'll have me to answer to. Come to speak to Mayorwald?
As you speak to him, he responds erratically, switching between 3 different personalities, each of them as mad as the others. He seems to have lost his mind, but as he tells you, his mind is not lost, but rather found, and he's found far too much of it. His soul has been awakened, meaning that he's gained awareness of its past lives, and those lives were full of horror and grief. During your discussion, you realise that the visions you keep having mean that you too have become awakened, and these apparitions are just the beginning. Unless you can find a way to become unawakened, your fate is to end up just like this poor broken man. Then, in a moment of madness, the old Watcher attacks you. You're forced to kill him, and in turn actually inherit the keep. However, the more pressing issue is losing your mind, so you set out to find the cultists who did this to you, a group you now know to be called the Leaden Key. As you adventure, you learn more about a curse that has befallen the area, known as Widewind's Legacy, or the Hollowborn Plague. For 15 years, children have been being born without souls, leaving them in essentially a permanent vegetative state. The cause of the curse is unknown, and everyone has a theory, but you soon discover that the Hollowborn souls have in fact been stolen by the Leaden Key through the use of machines like the one you saw. You make contact with a woman known as Lady Webb, who tells you a great deal about the Leaden Key and their leader, Theos, the man you saw performing the ritual. With Lady Webb's help, you uncover that the Leaden Key have been framing a type of scientist known as the Animancers for the cause of the Hollowborn Plague. Animancy is the study of souls, and it's still a very young field of study, but its implications on society have been vast. Through the study of souls...
Okay, so let's just take a breather here for a minute. So again, like, I mean, my goal isn't necessarily to, like, you know, just piss all over this franchise, right? My goal isn't to just make people's lives, I don't want you to necessarily be miserable or unhappy, or whatever. It's kind of just like muddling through all this grayness, right? There's a lot of nonsense. There's also a lot of realistic stuff. I don't know, trying to put, like, a Christian perspective on this. Try to come to terms and grips with this one way or the other. So, like, I mean, again, there is a lot of good. There's also a lot of evil in this game, or this series. You know, again, like in this game, and like all of the other newer ones too, they have to push. Again, like, it's not just like you can't just have a fun fantasy game, right? Like more like neutral, normal fantasy world. You gotta keep pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits constantly. Okay, so it's like, a lot of people were worried initially. They had to call it the satanic panic, right? You got the demons, you got your devils, and then they had to go, and then they put some magic in it, right? And then they have to go and they have to keep, every time they make a new game, you gotta push the boundary limits, right? So then they gotta go and they gotta add, they gotta put They put their so-called gods in there then, and they put their souls in there. So now you can see people's souls, and you can manipulate souls. And then they go to the next point, and they make planes. They make different planes you can go to. They put the supernatural in it. They put spirits in it. How can you manipulate spirits? How can you manipulate demons? How can you? And they start making more and more and more and more and more. They put all their supernatural stuff, and they put their fantasy stuff. They gotta make everything larger than life. And they gotta. Then it's like then they had their witchcraft early on, and they have this. They have to keep adding more and more and more and more and more stuff to it, because it's never enough, right? Again, like, my opinion is, a fantasy game is fun. Like, I used to really like the idea of fantasy. Even if you go back to someone like like Tolkien, right? He made it like a fantastical world, but he did have some kind of restraints. He didn't go completely off the rails. It's kind of like, he called it Middle Earth. It's kind of like Earth a little bit, but but it's not. He had some self-control. And you see this kind of game. You see the stuff they're messing with now, and frankly, they're probably going to be a lot worse going forward. I mean, honestly, I have no idea what they're going to be doing or what they're currently working on. I know they're probably working on some new version of some new fantasy that they can put in. Oh, only God himself truly knows just what kind of despicable stuff they're going to try to make, and they're going to start pushing it. They're coming up, I'm sure at some point, I don't know when, they're going to make Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition, and they had Baldur's Gate 3, which I'm sure they introduced. I haven't really played it. I've seen some stuff about it. I've watched some of the guy Hero Scrubs, his walkthrough a little bit. It's kind of a Christian walkthrough. It's also kind of just not a Christian walkthrough. But at the end of the day, at least it's a little bit better and a little bit less worse. But they got the new fantasy games coming out, right? You got the Elder Scrolls 6. You got the game after Skyrim. You got The Witcher 4, the game after Witcher 3. You also got they got their new Dragon's Dogma 2. They start manipulating different forms of very questionable, shady stuff, and they start manipulating it with other stuff. And they manipulate, and they build more new manipulations of things, and they make brand new creations. Oh yeah, I remember. And they also made stuff like in the whole they call that thing called like artificers or artificers. They take like artifacts and stuff that you can do, and they can start manipulating the idea of technology and magic, combine them together, right? There is no bounds that these people, their arrogance, will ever know. They must, in holiness, they must play as God, and they are determined to do it to themselves and as many people as possible until they probably die and burn in hell. That's their wickedness. And the Bible talks about these people. They create new sins, right? They make these sins up, and then they just continuously create and make brand new ones. And it's like, okay, yeah, so now you have, like, say you have artifacts, right? Now you can little technology, you have your little cube, right? Or you have a little trinket or little whatever you use. And you can put magic in it. You can take magic out. You put a soul in it, right? You can take a soul out. And then they always take from all their old ones of stuff they've used, and they bring a brand new one in. They bring their new games in. They put their new stuff in their new games. And it's like, also, as a Christian, at some point, you just gotta have some sense. There's common sense that isn't very common these days. You you got to have some wisdom, and maybe at some point in your life, or starting today or whenever, you got to just kind of like, maybe in your mind, draw like a hard neutral line down and kind of just break it and say, you know what? I have enough. This is too much. I'm not going to be doing more new stuff. And a lot of this wicked stuff in here are incredibly gray, or I don't even really know. I think I'm done with that video. Let's just keep going here for right now. At some point in your life, you got to just say, you know, enough is enough. I'm just not gonna use this stuff. There are certain things that are just bad, and I'm not gonna support it anymore, and I'm not gonna like it anymore, and I'm not gonna encourage it anymore. Let's see here. So this is supposed to be the second game, right? Okay, so what all they do, right? They so now they got, like, you know, again, they bring in a new idea. They start manipulating. You got like a pirate ship now, right? You got guns. You got bows and arrows. Now they can make, like, you know, magic bullets, right? They can put magic arrows. You know, and anything they can possibly get. They got their pistols. They got their rifles. Now they can put medieval stuff. They can do more realistic stuff. It doesn't matter. Now they'll always got to find some new way to manipulate it. And the same thing with, like, the races, right? You know, they add the race called like a tiefling, right? And they got to try to make everything as gray as possible. You have to make you feel guilty if you say something is bad. Like, you got the tiefling class. They're basically like a half demon, half human. But they got to make you so you sympathize with them, right? Because they always got to make everything as gray as possible. Because if everything is gray, then what's going to happen is that they can justify their evil. Because this is why people they want to make this stuff as gray as possible. Because if it wasn't very gray, then it's like a smokescreen for their true evil. They want to do terrible things, but they really just can't get away with it. But if they make it super gray, you're going to argue and fight and be mad about those gray things, which means they can do evil. It makes it a lot easier to do evil. It's like, you know, you want to play as like a thief. Well, it's a lot harder to just go around and just steal. You want to be a murderer. It's a lot harder to be a murderer in the kind of series like this. But if they throw a whole bunch of these smoke screens and smoke bombs out there, well, everybody's going to be mad about those things. And they can just keep doing more bad things. And keep pointing at this gray. And just keep making more and more of these illusions. Everybody has to deal with all that so they can never deal with the actual problem. So I mean, okay, so like, again, like, you know, from a Christian point of view, yeah, you gotta, I feel like you gotta be willing to draw a hard line. There has to be some point in your morality where you gotta say enough is enough. You know, and for me, I've sought to try to do that. And I know this makes a lot of people mad when I say that, or it makes them offended. But I mean, it's the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts and it's offensive. But it's the right thing to do. And it's good for your soul and good for your eternity too, right? You know, walk with God in righteousness. You don't have to do this evil anymore. Again, like, you know, for me, one major area is I try to avoid magic as much as I really can. Although it's also really hard in fantasy these days. So I try to tell people, you know, again, you shouldn't just maybe skip a magic class, right? If it's a class that's based around magic, maybe just skip it. If you have 20 options available, if you're a Christian, just maybe skip the magic class. You know, like, okay, like, let's take a look at some of the classes in this game. Okay, I think this is a picture with the vast majority of the classes. Okay, so you got a fighter, a rogue, a priest, a wizard, a druid, a barbarian. You got a ranger, a monk. They're called a cipher. They got a paladin, and there might be one more over there I can't see. And then there's also a bunch of subclasses too, and they got both games, right? They got like a pirate style class. They got a whole bunch of stuff, right? So again, like if you had the choice, especially as a Christian. Now I could not really recommend you play this game because there's just a lot of darkness in it. But I mean, again, this is kind of like, if you were going to do it anyways, or whatever you would do. If you could look through like say this list here, right? The ones that I have available. Or I'm sure there's like 5 or 10 other ones that exist too. As a Christian, you could have a team up to like 4 or 5 people. Or maybe you can have 6 in this game. I can't quite remember. Say it has like the wizard, right? Or there's like a sorcerer or a warlock. As a Christian, just skip those classes, right? You don't need to mess around with magic. Magic is evil. And you don't need to get in bed with that magic. Now, as I said before, it's also pretty gray. I'm not sure I really recommend it. It's kind of like the lesser of the two evils, where it's like, you got to make 2 choices between 2 hard choices. Maybe playing as like a cleric or playing as a priest on some levels, or like a paladin, or maybe you kind of like you subclass into it a little bit. Now again, I don't want to commit sin by saying that you can or should use it, but maybe if you're like a healer, or you have healing or righteous good, like godly powers, you could just kind of imagine in your mind from God himself. Maybe you're like a healer, right? Or you subclass partially into like a healer. Maybe you kind of reject the deity or whatever false deities they have, and maybe you use it for like you have some kind of powers that are righteous and good and holy. Maybe that could be maybe that could be justified. Now maybe it's not either. Just for practical sake, you can kind of just kind of like reject the whole magic aspect of that. And again, you could have one character in your team, and maybe heals or is smart or something. You don't have to be a wizard. Maybe maybe like a paladin, right? You're a paladin who has some holy powers and some righteous powers. And maybe you also don't have to use all of them, right? But you could use like a couple of them, or preferably maybe just healing, or I don't know. However you could rationalize it. I mean, you got to draw a hard line, and be unwilling to do a lot of things with it. Maybe that could be justified. Kind of like you play pretend within your mind, within a pretend world. Maybe as a Christian you can get away with that. If you don't lose your mind to it, and you keep your crap together, maybe that could be okay. But again, druids, they transform into like an animal. They use a lot of like nature magic. They use some healing magic. Again, you use a lot of magic, right? There's a lot of spells and a lot of the stuff. You could have a cipher. I think it's basically a person who does chanting, and you got all the D&D style. If it's not this game, you got all the other D&D style games. They got the so in this game they got the chanter. They're probably like an alchemist, someone who makes potions. Again, and making potions isn't necessarily evil, right? I mean, like alchemy in real life. I mean, there's like the bad alchemy, right? But it's just people who make potions, basically. These potions in these games have, fantastical versions of their abilities. Lets you do stuff with it. And again, they have the artificer. Again, they keep making more and more of these classes. I could barely keep up with half of them. You mess around with these things called artifacts. I mean, I honestly, I have to look into exactly. I mean, I'm not sure if artifacts are inherently evil. They're generally described, like you play like Magic the Gathering, you got artifacts in it. You got a lot of artifacts. You got artifacts in like watch like Indiana Jones or something. They got some rare artifact, usually some super powerful. It's like a relic, some neutral, super powerful, beyond imagination abilities that can usually are linked to it. Like Star Wars, they have these little cubes, and you kind of open up a cube, use some power on it and you open it up and it gives you some knowledge. I don't think artifacts are inherently evil, but as a Christian, you kind of have to be careful with this stuff. I mean, just because something could exist in real life, or maybe it, I mean, again, like they're really, really dangerous, and you don't really know what the consequences of your actions are messing around with stuff like that. But again, maybe you could play as like, again, and I'm not. This might just be D&D in general. You know, some good Christian discernment, right? You know, one of your characters could maybe be like a. Oh yeah, well, so they also have some other names, and they call them like a tinkerer, I think is might be what it's called, where you like you tinker around with different, like, you know, engineering stuff. You know, they have maybe a person who does, like, you know, maybe they craft potions. They throw demolition style stuff. You can make a flask and you can throw it and it'll blow up or something. But again, you know, it gets a little bit shady. But you could be like a poisoner or something. Mess around with poisons. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's not all evil, right? You know, as a Christian, you could justify probably playing a class like that. And this is also a great excuse for you to play like a smart character, right? And your intelligence could be fused into this kind of stuff. And instead of having to use magic, you could be like a kind of like a creator. You create things, right? And you could find a way in holiness to glorify God with that. And that could be maybe something that could be okay. And again, like, you know, you got like a fighter. I mean, a fighter's just like a martial arts. He or she uses some kind of like a sword or a shield or armor. And you just fight like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong. Like that's fine. The rogue, you can play a rogue. I mean, you don't have to be like the devil. I mean, you can do stealth for your team. You can be a rogue that supports the team rather than just like a liar and a thief. If you do tell lies, you could tell lies at least for the sake of what's right, rather than, you know, for like the devil. I mean, obviously there's the 10 holy commandments of God that state that, you know, thou shalt not lie, or thou shalt not you know, bear false witness against one's neighbor. I mean, you know, that's a strong moral 10 commandments. You probably ain't gonna get around that. You can try, but it is real hard. But again, if you were gonna use deception or something, at least you could be good. And if you were gonna use, like, you could pick locks, you could maybe use some kind of deception abilities or powers. You can hopefully they're not magic, right? And again, you can mix and match a lot of these classes, right? So again, you can find classes maybe in like a fantasy world that aren't demonic and that aren't satanic. Then maybe, you know, you can worship God with it. You can try to do good and right and holy, tell the truth. Again, you can mix subclasses with regular classes. You know, like maybe the rogue can also use, like, you know, alchemist or something. He can use some kind of poisons. You know, or you can use, and you have stealth. They can throw a smoke bomb or something. And you don't have to be evil as a rogue. And then you get like a barbarian, basically just like you get angry and you fight with combat. Like a martial artist, and you use, like, you know, these like this angry powers or something. And again, I don't think powers are inherently, like, they're not necessarily demonic, but they can be a little bit gray and sketchy. You got like a paladin. Again, like, you know, you serve righteousness. You don't have to serve one of these false deities. You know, serve God. Serve God with it instead. You got like the chanter. The chanter also could probably be described at times known as like a bard. Like, you know, bards aren't necessarily, like, again, they're not necessarily an evil class necessarily, and you don't have to use magic as like a bard. It's just that you use an instrument, right? Maybe, you know, you could justify and make your own version of some of these. I mean, obviously this is Pillars of Eternity, right? But you know, all the different D&D, maybe you could be someone who, you know, you write songs, you help soothe. You can almost be like a healer, right? You can play an instrument. Maybe you're like an author too. Maybe you maybe you help write some kind of a story. You're kind of like a storyteller. You can create a story, and maybe you can help some. You can ease pain. You can tell a story. You have like a power of like narration. You get to narrate things. and build some kind of agendas. You don't have to use magic necessarily. And maybe you're good at combat. Like you can use a sword, or like a rapier, or like a duelist weapon, or you can use a crossbow. Or you can fight, you can help out, you can support the team. Maybe you don't have to use magic, but you can have like a song-based abilities that help when people hear your songs, when you sing a song, or you play an instrument. It it helps the team, right? And the same thing with like a paladin. Paladins have like auras, an aura of like aura of righteousness, helps the team out. You can sometimes I think the best way to look at your character is to support the team. Supporting yourself, that's pretty selfish, right? But try to help other people in your team, or pick abilities that let you help other people in the world. And you got like a monk. I mean, there are like Christian monks, and monks generally are people who seek out peace. Like in scriptures, it says, blessed are the peacemakers. Or what does it say? I can't remember what it says. It's one of the Butides. I think it says, what is it? Let me check here. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called known as the sons of God, or they will be called the sons of God. So, I mean, people who seek out peace for themselves and other people are generally described as, most people will see you as a Christian. They will say, well, you're one of God's children, because it's basically what you are, right? Well, in worship, the Lord Jesus Christ himself, he's known as the Prince of Peace. He seeks out peace. Now, he's also God, and he's the Father and the Son and the Spirit in one. But I mean, he's the Almighty, and he's the Lion, and he's the Lamb. But he also seeks out peace, right? I mean, you read the Bible, like the New Testament. He always helps people. He shows peace. He seeks to not be violent, even though he has the power to do anything. He restrains himself and purposely doesn't do certain things. Like he could, if somebody slapped him across the face as being God, what could he do? Anything he wanted. He could call him in. As being God, he legally can do whatever he wants. He could just open up the sky and send like a lightning bolt down and just kill 1,000 people for insulting him. If he wanted to do that, he could do anything, right? I mean, in this game they use magic, which is generally evil, but but God in heaven, he can do anything. And there's plenty of scriptures in the Old Testament that he did. And he did what he wanted. As being the Father, he literally did what he wanted. Like there was the 10 plagues of Egypt. He used things like like the environment, like the sky. He sent like bugs to go around and torment people and their families. He humbled kings. He used water. He parted the oceans, all the huge water, so people could walk through water. And he can do anything. And like in the book of Revelation, I believe he describes it as he calls all of the birds of the entire earth, or I don't even know, just massive, probably millions of flying creatures, and just summons them all. He basically just summons them. He's calls them forth and beckons them. So it was when in Revelation, when he slaughters the enemy of basically the Antichrist's army, they have this giant pool of blood that just drips down for I think several miles. And he summons these birds just to eat their flesh of the dead people that he and his army killed. I mean, imagine that kind of power. That you can just take all the animals, all the flying animals of the entire earth, and just call them to you, and just have them all eat your entire enemy's corpses. That I mean, because he's God, he can do things like that. But I mean, again, not all powers. How long is this? 50 minutes now. With the monks. So there's Christian monks, and there's just monks in general that are they're neutral. I mean, more often than not, they're probably good. I think even druids and monks are kind of similar. Druids kind of are people that exist within the real world. Obviously, they give them some like nature or some other stuff, but they're just kind of like, they're more, druids are generally described as more like peaceful people. And you got like the rangers. I mean, again, I like rangers a lot. They're a cool class. You specialize in like a bow and arrow, and you can get yourself a animal companion or something. Oh yeah, I'll also say this about rogues. I mean, there are examples in the scriptures. Like you read like the Old Testament and even the New Testament. Like being a rogue isn't necessarily evil. You can do a lot of good, being kind of like a morally great kind of class. There were spies in the Old Testament who they served like the Israelites. There were and there's examples where deception was allowed or used, or the ability to like cause a level of illusions, or not evil trickery, right? Like where God Himself in heaven, when they were fighting in Israel was fighting, I believe, the Palestinians back in I don't even know how many thousands of years ago this was. There was a war, and God created this giant like illusion in these people's minds, or they heard sound like an army, right? There was no army, but it sounded like a massive like army. I think they had like the Assyrian army or something was coming. They heard like chariots or something. I mean, obviously you might have to fact check some of these things. It's just the idea. I mean, and God created this deception, this illusion for all these people. So their force, they went, and I believe, and they fled because God had the victory. And then, like in the idea, and there was also I think it's just called like I can't remember her name off the top of my head. She's like some kind of a prostitute, and she was a Rami, I think, or Rami. It was some kind of a girl, and she put some like a piece of her cloth on the door, and she let some of these Israelites in, and that she helped their team win and she hid these people. She hid and they had 2 Israelite spies, and she was kind of a spy in her own way that she became. I mean, like, the idea of tricking somebody, not like in an evil way, right? And there's plenty of examples in the Old Testament where people like deceive people in a sense, but not necessarily always evil, right? You point them in a different direction than really whether they're going, and you kind of like, it's like almost like using wisdom in a sense. And oh yeah, so like that prostitute, she let them into their house. She lied about it, and then they were able to take the fortress or take their city because the Israelites could come in, open up the gates, and then they sent the army in, right? And they were able to defeat them. And I can't quite remember which of the leaders of Israel at the time there was. There was also a lot of them in that line. And I believe God told the leader at the time that prostitute they were to spare her life because she helped them, right? She did a really like a righteous action. It was an act of faith in a way. Yeah, she used some bad methods, right? But it was for the sake of what was good, but it was kind of a bad thing to do. And being a prostitute, obviously that's a bad thing, right? Selling your sex for money, that's a bad thing. But she did get to keep her life, and I believe she got some kind of reward out of it at the end. She got some kind of honor from it. And it's not like God told their leaders, "Oh, she's a prostitute. Don't give her a reward, but put her to death." No, He didn't, because I mean, so you can read that's just like like it's just a fact. Obviously, prostitution is a bad thing, but God didn't condemn her at that moment instantly. I mean, He did recognize that she was a prostitute, but she wasn't condemned, right? Again, like the idea of using some kind of trickery. I mean, Abraham, I think he used some kind of trickery, and his son Jacob, he used some kind of trickery. There's a lot. I mean, obviously, this stuff usually has consequences too. You're not going to trick somebody and get off the hook, but it is considered to be okay sometimes, or it's like it's like morally gray. And in the New Testament, there was there was like the three wise men, right? They had Herod, and I believe God the Father in heaven, when his son was coming to this earth. I think they were called like the Magi, I think, and they were told, I think, God sent his angel and told them to don't go back to Herod, because they originally told Herod called them in and basically told them that, when the Son of God, when the Messiah comes to this earth, tell me about him, right? Come back and tell me to him. And they said, yes, we will we will tell him about him. We will tell you about him. And then an angel came by and it's like, don't go back to them. Just continue on with your journey instead. So they didn't go back to him. And that was for the sake of the greater good, right? But that's kind of trickery in a lot of ways too, because they said they would, and then they didn't do what they said they were going to do. But it was a good thing. It's kind of like, tricking somebody. You trick somebody for the sake of a higher, greater good. But it's also, there can be consequences sometimes too. Now, in holiness, God does what he wants. Maybe that was the greater righteous thing to do. I think Abraham, he was like, Abraham, his wife Sarai, or became Sarah, he was like, I don't want you to don't tell these people my name. No, don't tell them that you are my wife. Just say you're like, some distant relative, or you're just, I don't know, or my sister. I can't remember exactly what he said. Basically, he commanded his wife to trick them in a sense, so that way they wouldn't mistreat Abraham. So, his wife tells them, with the story that because she's being obedient to her husband, so she has to do what he says in a way. So she tells him what he told them to do. So now, and then later on, they find out that Abraham basically pulled a fast one on them. So they're mad. And, but I believe basically everything worked out in the end, one way or the other. Luckily, a lot of this stuff worked out good. I believe God told them that I withheld your hand so you didn't actually touch Sarah. Because otherwise, otherwise God would have punished them. But he knew that they didn't really know any better, right? So God made it work out good. So again, I know this is kind of like ideas of moral grayness, right? Also, I think Jacob from the there's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob, he told a lot of lies and he did a lot of deception and manipulation too. He got himself the birthright, or I think he got both of them. Then he performed a lot of trickery. He did a lot of really shady stuff, kind of like a rogue. He's like a biblical rogue in a lot of ways. His name, I think he later became called Israel, or Israel or something. He had his 12 sons after that, because Abraham performed a lot of trickery. So then his son, he performed a lot of trickery too, and it kind of it spread through his line of them pulling lots of. They played their morals pretty fast and loose. And again, I think then Jacob, his name became Israel. I can't speak tonight. It is Israel. And he had his sons, right? And then he had Joseph and his sons, and then they played a lot of trickery too. And their whole family, again, like the consequences of playing with the gray, I guess. It goes down your family line, and new people are going to come into your family. But guess what they're going to do? The same kind of stuff you're going to do. And that whole deception. How long is this? We're going on an hour. Okay, again, this shows the idea of like a rogue, or like there's a whole bunch of different names, right? There's there's more evil roads. There's the more like good roads. You could be like a spy. You could be an assassin. You could be like a trickster. You could be like a poisoner. You could be I mean, there's probably like chaotic good versions of this stuff too. I think it's like a swashbuckler or something. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Like the idea of lots of grayness. There's good, there's evil, and this is also the consequences of playing as a rogue. You can you can manipulate your words. You can lots of trickery. I think what's that guy's name? I think he's it's called a Gideon who became Gideon. He called himself like a troll. He trolled people, right? And he also talked about the consequences of trolling people. Like he was like a trickster. He tricked people. He caused people to lose some of their jobs. He played lots of pranks and stuff. And again, and that's kind of like the negative road. And the good road, the good roads is that maybe you can save someone's life. It lets you play a little bit more fast and loose with your morals sometimes. But there's going to be consequences. Now, it'll probably work out well in the end. If you're doing the right thing, it'll probably work out. But, I mean, is it worth it, right? And you're going to cause a lot of gray, and it's going to be really difficult for a lot of people. And eventually, people are going to. Who's another good example of like a rogue? Like Han Solo from Star Wars. He played his morals pretty fast and loose, just like a lot of people. And again, the idea of a rogue, you could be chaotic good. You could be you're chaotic. I mean, you can be good, you can be neutral, and you can be evil. But you're always chaotic. You're playing your life pretty fast and loose. That's basically what being the moral class of chaotic is. You don't really have a strong set of morals, and you don't really adhere to them. You just kind of just do whatever you want, and you basically just hope you don't get caught, or hope the consequences take a long time. And just like moral grayness, play fast and loose. You're always kind of you're seeking a thrill. You seek a real thrill out. All right. I guess I'm gonna end this here. Again, you saw some hypothetical classes as a Christian, and maybe this gives you an idea of what you could or couldn't do if you're playing any kind of fantasy. I mean, obviously, I played a lot of fantasy. I'm not trying to tell you. I don't have the moral authority to tell you not to do this, or to even tell you to do this. I've done this a lot. I probably did this more than you. I probably have played and joined this more than you probably ever will. I mean, it's kind of naughty of me, right? But but here's some hypothetical examples. But there's a lot of things and there's also a lot of reasons just to skip fantasy, right? A very hardcore conservative point, and we just skip it all together. Do you need this garbage in your life? Probably not. You can find a realistic world. Play like Wasteland or something. Or find something that's not this. There's plenty of them out there. I mean, you want to feel good about yourself and not have to deal with it. I mean, I've kind of, in a ways, I've kind of consigned myself to be part of fantasy. Even making this kind of video and stuff, right? I've enjoyed it a lot in the past. I'm probably going to continue to enjoy it in some levels. Or even if I don't enjoy it, I'll probably still interact with it here and there. It's probably just my fate, right? But it doesn't have to. You don't have to do what I've done. But try to avoid the magic classes if possible, and try to be more of a normal, regular person, or try to be more righteous even. And what was I saying about the moral authority, right? I mean, I don't have the right to tell you not to play this game. I mean, because I played it myself. I beat this game twice. I enjoyed it a lot too, right? And but just know that if you do decide to play these kind of games, right, you should know what you're getting signed up for. And there's a lot of grayness in it. And you might not escape it either. There's consequences of your actions. There's consequences for my actions. But here's the thing about the difference maybe between myself and other people. I'm trying to make a video now and I'm trying to make it right on some levels. I'm using what I've been given, to try to do the right thing and stand against what's wrong. So I've enjoyed lots of fantasy for years, but at least I made a video about it, right? I'm trying to, discern a little bit. This is probably my fate to use fantasy for years. And it is what it is, right? But that doesn't have to be you. And again, so what right do I have to tell you not to play this game? That just make me a moral hypocrite. But I don't know if I can. I also, with a clear conscience, I cannot tell you that you should also play this game, because you're probably are going to get yourself in deep, and you're probably going to get into some deep crap that's really hard to get out of. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, enjoying all this fantasy stuff, there's going to be consequences. I'm sure. I know as a fact, there will be consequences towards myself. Like, can you stop thinking about this stuff? Well, what are some consequences towards being part of these kind of world and society, right? Well, you got your magic, right? You got all your fantasy stuff. It builds a level of a foundation in your consciousness. It builds the foundations in the literal real world societies. How many D&D groups are there? How many Magic the Gathering groups are there? How many of these? There's 30 of these D&D style games. To be honest with you, I can't even keep track of all the names of them. I haven't even played them all. Or maybe I have played a lot of them, but there's so many out there. And most of them have sequels or trilogies. And they make them in the CRPG games. They make them in the the first person perspectives. There's just so very many of these. And they make a lot of money. And they're not going to go away. I would argue they're actually going to advance significantly. So, again, you got to be careful. And, be wise, right? Be wise, don't be foolish. Don't be smart, don't be stupid. I probably put, I don't even know how many thousands of hours into fantasy. At this point, it'd be next to impossible for me to even get away from it. It's probably just my fate. It's my fate and my destiny at this point. I might as well just learn to accept it. That's why, I feel like, if you're like me and you've consigned yourself to this fate, it's just, and you're a Christian, it is what it is. Now, I can use fantasy, in holiness to glorify God and to help the other people of the faith. And maybe I've been a foolish person for it at the same time. But at least my foolishness can have some kind of value for other people. And again, I don't believe I have the moral authority on all this stuff, but I do believe certain things are evil. And if you do have the ability to skip it, then just skip it. You don't have to sow into those things. You don't have to worship false deities. You don't have to cast your spells. You don't have to, use your demon powers or something. You don't have to do all that stuff. If you're a Christian, expect them to make more classes that are more righteous and more neutral. They're going to probably make 15 other spellcasting classes. Don't go out and find some ideas of other classes out there that you could expand on a large list. And start expecting and demanding that these companies and these people start making more classes that are more friendly for a Christian. Because if this stuff isn't going to go away, and you can't really deal with it, you might as well just start making it better. Because if you're sick of having there be 35 different magics, and there's 3 neutral classes, expect them and demand them to do better. Expect your Dungeons and Dragons, we call them WotC or Paizo or all these different people, Obsidian or Larian Studios. If they're going to make so many different classes, expect them to make better. Expect them to come up with new classes that are more Christian friendly. Maybe it's not a direct Christian class, but expect them to make more neutral worlds or neutral classes, right? I don't even know what half the names are. I don't know if whoever you are, if you got this far into the video and you're a Christian, it's going on an hour and 10 minutes now. Come up with some ideas for some new classes that maybe that are not as obvious and easy to, maybe they aren't really available, that you feel that are more neutral, or that are more righteous, that a Christian could play. If you know of any of these and you watch this, wherever you're at, probably do the comment on YouTube, so I'll probably see it more. But again, wherever you're at, just write a comment down, or go look it up or think about it. Right? Come up with a class and find some ideas, or just think about it in your mind. Expect these companies, if you're going to pay all this money and you're a Christian playing this stuff, expect them to come up with some non-magic classes that are more like biblical and Christian friendly. Expect it and demand it. You deserve a lot better too. I mean, because if they're going to put all this other stuff out there, and it's a fantasy world, expect them to do better. Find more classes. Find more subclasses that are much more neutral. Because I mean, yeah, we should have better stuff in our fantasy. Or have more Christians, provide and make the stuff. All right, let's just end this here. Thanks. The Lord Jesus Christ is good.